Hello, this is Sue Lloyd, Vice Chair of the ISSB, and I'm here today with our Chair, Emmanuel Faber. We're recording this podcast following our October board week. So today we're going to be discussing what's been happening with the ISSB over the last month, what we did this week at our meetings, and what we've got planned in the next few weeks. So Emmanuel, looking back, probably a good place to start is New York Climate Week. You were there, and we announced a commitment to deepen our partnership with the World Bank. So maybe we could start with that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sue. And indeed, we had a very busy, lively, productive New York Climate Week a couple of weeks ago. And that was an opportunity to further drive adoption of the ISSB standards in emerging markets and developing economies through the announcement of building from the existing partnership agreement between the IFRS Foundation and the World Bank that has been very helpful in delivering the adoption of the IFRS accounting standards in EMDEs to now incorporate the addition of the ISSB remit and work. And so we are really thrilled that this extension of the MOU will deliver for the adoption the support of the World Bank in so many ways. Additionally, and importantly, the World Bank also announced that they had embarked on a multi-year roadmap aimed at aligning its climate and its related sustainability-related financial disclosures with the ISSB standards. So that was an important announcement, but Sue, we also had a couple of other important topics, including we issued some guidance for companies choosing to apply the ISSB standards on a voluntary basis. Maybe you could say a word about this, please.
Sure. So we talk a lot about jurisdictional adoption of our standards. So those are situations when companies will be required to use the ISSB standards. But we're also really interested in situations when companies just choose to use our standards, not because they're told to, but because they choose to do so. And that's what this guide is really about. And companies might decide to use our standards for, a variety of reasons. One is because those making investments in them ask for them to do so, because it can be a great way of preparing for reporting across different markets in the world, because it helps from a business management perspective to really help the company itself get deeper insights into how sustainability risks and opportunities are going to affect the business in the long term. Because it helps highlight what's similar and different with their peers in the industry. And also because, of course, it's a really fabulous way to communicate to the market to attract capital. So there's lots of really good reasons for why a company doesn't need to be told to use our standards. And so the guide's really there to encourage voluntary application and also to set out some guidelines for how to go about doing that. And so one of the really important messages in the document is don't be scared to start. And it's okay to start not doing everything that's in the standards. But if you do that, it's really important to explain to investors what you have applied and what you haven't applied. So there's good transparency for investors to understand how to compare those disclosures against those of companies that are using the ISSB standards in full, and to communicate the expected timeline to get to full application of the standards. So there's an important communication aspect there. But also what we try to emphasize in this guide is that don't be scared to start. We know that it requires time and effort to get ready to use our standards, but we've worked really hard to introduce transition reliefs and proportionality mechanisms into our standards, and we really highlight the importance of that and encourage companies, frankly, to make use of those. Also, we talk about how those who have already done some sustainability reporting based on the TCFD recommendations, the SASB standards, CDSB materials, or the integrated reporting framework are in a great place to transition to starting to use our standards. So I think it's a really helpful document, and I really recommend that those who aren't subject to these sort of regulatory requirements take a look and see what they might be inspired to do to get started using our standards to communicate with investors. And then speaking of investors, Emmanuel, you were in Canada at the PRI in-person meeting, so it might be good to talk a little bit about that.
Yes, sure, Sue. Thank you. And just echoing what you just said about our voluntary application guide, we certainly met a lot of corporates in New York, including US based corporates that are looking at the ISSB standards as, in a way, no regret option for them. That would allow them to also comply with regulations in a number of jurisdictions. As we know, more than 25 now are in the journey towards adoption of the ISSB standards. And it was also interesting, as you just said, about SASB, TCFD, and others, given the take-up in the US and in New York in particular of those frameworks in the past. It was really very well received that we had this voluntary application guide for them. And indeed, I was then in Canada for the PRI in-person meeting in Toronto. That was great to be there. In particular, this was a moment, a timely conversation in a way, because we're engaging closely with investors to understand their information needs around nature and human capital, our current research project, but also as we are going to enhance the SASB standards in a number of really critical industries, as we know. And so that was really good to engage with this community. I think it was also encouraging to hear again, not only PRI as an organization, but also a number of other their members to continue to advocate for the adoption of the ISSB standards across the world. And before we move to maybe this week's agenda, Sue, could you tell us a word about the Milan visit that we had at the back end of last week?
Yeah, so last week was a great few days for us in Milan, and it was great. We had me and Emmanuel were both there, as well as the leadership of the IASB. So Andreas and Linda were there, along with one of the board members from each of our side, and Dee from our side, and Nick Anderson from the IASB. So I think really, firstly, signalling to the market just how important this integrated reporting community and the integrated reporting framework and the integrated thinking principles are to us, that we put that amount of focus into this event. So we had a conference in Milan, which was really focusing on the relevance of the integrated reporting framework to our work, both at the ISSB, where we have really built in key concepts from the integrated reporting framework right in the heart of IFRS S1. And also the IASB talked about the links between the integrated reporting framework and their work on management commentary. And we talked a lot about how those who use integrated thinking principles are really super well positioned to use the IFRS standards, because this way of thinking about value creation, which is just so embedded and familiar to those who understand integrated thinking, is really at the heart of what is underpinning the whole concept of sustainability reporting for the ISSB. And I think we had a series of really great conversations with some of the key stakeholders in the integrated reporting community from around the world, discussing different perspectives about the use of our standards with integrated reporting, looking forward a bit in terms of the work that both we are doing and the IASB is doing, including work on intangibles. And it really set the scene, and I think really encouraged us all to remember how important this legacy is and how people should be using the integrated reporting framework in the context of the new work that we've been doing at the ISSB. And for me, I think it was a fabulous sort of step towards this week's board week, Emmanuel, where we had a really important conversation that sort of comes back to this all-important topic of connectivity. And maybe you'd like to talk a little bit about that discussion.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sue. And I mean, again, completely aligned with what you say. It was really interesting to dig back into how much S1 is actually describing the importance of information on sustainability topics for investors, because a company's ability to generate value over time really is inextricably linked to its ecosystem. And so, interestingly, a few days later, indeed, this week, we had a first conversation with our board about connectivity and a connected conversation, which is, I think, the first one with our IASB colleagues. The context of that was on management commentary as the IASB is advancing its project to finalize this practice statement. The ISB refers to this project as a stepping stone, by the way, to further integration in reporting in the future. And in that context, our staff brought a paper with a recommendation to publicly consult on an amendment to IFRS S1 to be specific that if a company applies the IASB's management commentary practice statement, it is required, when possible, given regulatory requirements, to locate its sustainability-related financial information prepared applying the ISSB standards in the management commentary to the extent that it is possible in accordance with the practice statement. And so this recommendation was really for if a company uses the practice statement, it would still be able to use any gap, of course, or indeed, for example, the integrated reporting framework. So, you know, this really was meant to ensure that depending on where the spaceship of the management commentary practice statement would travel, we would be actually docking S1 appropriately and therefore supporting connections in disclosures, which frankly, I was personally thrilled that we had that opportunity to do it now, because, and again, beyond the connectivity itself, it's about the connection, which makes, I think, the IFRS Foundation's absolutely unique selling proposition in terms of cost effectiveness and decision usefulness for investors. I think we had a really thoughtful conversation, many different angles brought to the discussion. Overall, a very strong support for the idea. We refrained from actually making a decision at this time, with all ISSB members reiterating their commitment to more connected reporting and the importance of working closely with the IASB. So it was a great substantive conversation, paving the way, I think, for a well-informed and adjusted decision when times come to do this at a later date. I would just like to re-clarify what I said earlier, which is that, of course, any amendments to IFRS S1, if that was the final decision of the board, would be subject to a stakeholder consultation, of course. So really new type of conversation for the board, but I think paving the way as well of a process whereby we coordinate with our sister board when topics are connected in a manner which is proportionate to their level of connection. So great start as far as I'm concerned for this important conversation. We also discussed in another session, some progress in our research areas. Sue, and I'm sure you'd be delighted to share a bit more about this, please.
Sure, but before I talk about the research on nature and human capital, I can't resist just reflecting for a moment on an observation you made in that discussion about management commentary there, Emmanuel, because, you know, given my history at the IASB, for many years, people have asked me what a practice statement actually is. You know, what's the status of it? Where does it fit into the literature? But I've never heard it described as a spaceship before. So it'll be interesting to see if that description takes on in the market or not. You've heard it here first. Okay, so, but back to serious stuff. Yes, so the other topic that we discussed at the board meeting was feedback that we received from a great survey, I think, that the staff conducted with members of our Sustainability Standards Advisory Forum about fact-finding mission, really, on the existing and upcoming jurisdictional disclosure requirements on the topics of nature and human capital as part of our research work. And 26 jurisdictions responded to this, and it showed that there is a lot of existing disclosure requirements out there. So the key takeaways on nature were that most of the jurisdictions that responded do have nature-related disclosure requirements in place. Almost all of those requirements are mandatory, with a mix of focus on meeting investor needs and providing information to other stakeholders, although it seemed that that difference in focus hadn't really led to many significant differences per se in the requirements. Only one jurisdiction with nature reporting at the moment currently takes an industry-based approach based on the ISSB standards. And we noted that there was a mix of quantitative and qualitative disclosure requirements out there. And also many said that they were watching our work closely to decide what to do next on their nature reporting. So good to know that people have got us in mind. We asked about human-related disclosures as well. And again, almost all the jurisdictions that responded have disclosure requirements, and they're almost all mandatory. Again, some of those are investor focused, but there's also a focus on broader stakeholder information needs. And there was some commonality in topics, but it was pretty apparent that there was a range of different types of information being asked for. So really great feedback, and thank you to those who contributed to that survey, because it's really helpful for us to get this sort of horizon span across the market as part of this research. The SAF itself met at the beginning of the week and discussed this feedback as well, and that was also a good discussion which you can listen to on our website. So what do we do with all of this? Of course, our job is not just to sort of create an encyclopedia of international disclosure requirements. This is in the context of our standard setting work. So in terms of next steps, we talked about how we might use this information. It's really I think, to help us understand the landscape, what's out there already. So what's the base people are starting to work from, where there's opportunities for more alignment to make more efficiency. And also we can hone in on particular disclosure requirements and ask specific questions about whether they meet investors' information needs, and also ask companies their experience in applying them. So it's a really great way of sort of targeting some of our research and hopefully giving us inspiration for disclosures that we might build on as part of our research work. And we're also going to look and see whether there are particular disclosures there that have a particular sort of industry resonance, because that will help inform our ISSB enhancement work. So overall, I think a really great insight into current disclosure requirements and practices and how we might build out our global baseline in the future. And over the next couple of months, we'll start to see more analysis from the staff as they continue this research phase of gathering information to inform next steps on our research on those two topics. So, Emmanuel, what else is on the radar over the next weeks?
The radar of the spaceship, you mean?
Yeah, into the globe.
So yeah, we have a whole fleet of spaceships actually, and maybe I'll take this opportunity just to say that since the standards were finalized in June 2023, and with ISSB's endorsement, and then the reveal at ISSB's May 2024 general meeting that already 20 plus jurisdictions were on the pathway, I'd just like to highlight one thing that does not appear so much in these podcast, which is really about our technical work. And that is the fact that all of us at ISSB, all 14 colleagues, are working specifically with our teams on engagement, regulatory engagement, market engagement in all of these jurisdictions. And so when I think about what's coming for the next weeks, even before talking to you about technical work, the first thing that comes to mind is how many activities are actually taking place, including, by the way, importantly for this audience, taking appropriate actions in the framework of consultations. More and more jurisdictions are consulting, and we've been always very active ensuring that the baseline would be highlighted as much as possible, and in dialogue and conversations with jurisdictions in order to learn what really investors are needing in terms of that baseline. And so with that in mind, we've got colleagues right now in Cali, in Colombia, for the Biodiversity COP. It's both a way to engage with jurisdictions for adoption, but also to continue to progress the technical work that Hugh's just been discussing about biodiversity and other topics, of course, as we advance our nature-related work. Next will be Baku with COP29, where we also are going to have some of our people there, And we will publish a first report that will look at the progress made on climate-related disclosures in jurisdictions around the world, as well as some corporate take-up on those aspects. So a very expected report from us that will go more granular after the announcements of the names of such jurisdictions in May of this year at IOSCO's general meeting. Also a way to engage with a number of jurisdictions, again, on adoption. More specifically on technical work, and next week, we are going to be publishing an update to the ISSB standards taxonomy, which will reflect the updates that are resulting from both the internationalization work that was completed last year and the update to the climate disclosure requirements that are being made with Appendix B of IFRS S2, and to maintain consistency with IFRS S2 this way. And so that is ground work in a way for the enhancement project that we're also working on right now. And finally, to come back to the main topic of this podcast, reporting on our technical agenda and how we work to build it. Next month, we will all be meeting out of our office in Beijing. So we really look forward to updating you all then on what I think is a pretty promising agenda for us. So with that, Sue, shall we close?
Yeah, I think that's enough. Thank you very much. Until next time.
Thank you all.
For the latest developments from either the International Sustainability Standards Board or the International Accounting Standards Board, make sure to subscribe on the IFRS Foundation website, www.ifrs.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please take some time to rate, review, and subscribe on your preferred podcast player.